Hey everyone, welcome back to the episode of the Real Talk with Ben podcast. And man, does it feel good to say that again. It's been a very long time. It's been what, 3 months or so, maybe longer, 4 months. It's been a long time since I've had an episode out. And it's really crazy because I know how many of you love the podcast and how much it really kept you informed of what's going on here in Hungary and in my life. And to be honest with you, I went, they call it a writer's block. I kind of went through a creative block. And I've said that on a couple of my other videos that I've done. And one of the biggest things too is my Twitch is kind of slowly dissipated. Hopefully we'll be back again. There's a lot of things that, I've been dealing with. I'm a little sick, or I'm coming off of being sick, as you can hear. And you might be looking at the title of the video like, this is not what we were talking about today in the podcast, Ben. And you're right. This is not what it's about. But what it is about is Dr. Ervin and a conversation that I had with Dr. Ervin. And it was an amazing conversation about just how an amazing story of what God has done in his life, how he brought him through different education experiences to really start a school that is community driven, that is based on what he believes is the best learning style for students. And so I was able to do that. And I think this is the best way and the perfect way to start off Real Talk with Ben again. This is episode 103, but I consider this episode 1, really. Maybe the new 1.1. I don't know. But I'm glad that you're back and listening. If you love watching this and listening to this, please share it, because Dr. Ervin has some great advice, some great suggestions on, and especially as a teacher, what you can be doing. And I really hope you do enjoy this. Once again, I apologize if my voice sounds a little weird in the interview. I was kind of sick actually while I was doing it. But hopefully you get to be encouraged and you get to hear an amazing story of what God is doing. And I'll be back after to give a little summary of what's next for the Real Talk with Ben podcast. But till then, enjoy this interview with Dr. Ervin. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Real Talk with Ben podcast. And I am here with a former professor of mine, a colleague in the education field. I've known him for quite a while. I was just telling him off air that he's now taught me things that I teach my students, which is always fun. It's cool and all that. So this is Dr. Jeremy Ervin, who was a professor when I was at Cedarville University, and now has started a new chapter, a new phase of what God is doing in his life. And so before I let you go, Dr. Ervin, I'm just going to say, for all those that are wondering, how is this possible? You're like across the ocean. It's called technology, which is going to relate to what we're talking about today, as we talk about STEAM schools, which I think some people will be confused. But before we get into that, Dr. Ervin, first off, thank you for being on, and why don't you talk about your testimony of how God's brought you here to this point?
Sure. Thanks, Ben, for the invitation. I love talking about how God has kind of molded my life to be at such a time as this, and putting me into a position to be successful in opening the STEAM Academy. So from a testimonial perspective, what's very interesting is I grew up in a Christian home. And so going to church, going to a Christian school, having chapels, and having all these people come in and give these testimonies about how God saved them out of this incredible, horrible lifestyle that they were in, and all this. And I kept in the back of my mind thinking, oh, I don't have a very good testimony. I have a boring testimony and stuff. And so when people ask me, well, what's your testimony? It's not really exciting. And then I stopped and realized now as an adult, I have the best testimony in the world, because
Amen.
Ultimately I only knew what it was like to think through a biblical worldview perspective, because my family was a Christian. I came through the nursery in a church nursery. I was at church all the time. And so I was constantly surrounded with the reality of the supernatural, understanding the faith piece, understanding how God can use things, seeing how God used things.
Mm.
And so at an early age, I remember um, during we did like a little mini revival in our church
Mhm.
between Christmas and New Year's, and it was December 28th. And at going to the big people's church as a 5-year old instead of going to the off to the children's church, I heard a guy preach about fire and brimstone, right? Like about the reality of hell. And truly, I was like, I don't want to go there, right? And that it was like reality here. And so that night when my mom was tucking me into bed, I remember specifically asking her, like, so if I don't want to go to hell, I want to go to heaven. I just really have to commit myself to the Lord and
Mm.
understand that I'm a sinner, right? And she was like, yes. And for the first time in my life, like this whole emotional
Mm.
interaction about the reality of my life and the needing of a savior
Mm.
just kind of like overtook me, and I started crying,
Yeah.
which the only time I ever cried was sometimes when I got spanked, which frustrated my parents because my dad would like spank me and like I'm gonna keep spanking him until he cries, and I was like, I'm not gonna cry, right? But ultimately, that swell of emotions and the reality of my life being in the hands of the need of a savior, and at an early age, I came to know him. And it was an interesting journey all along the way. I would have to say that for the most part, I did rededicate my life to focusing back on the Lord and working and doing his will between my freshman and sophomore year in high school. And I really, realized that, I kind of was adrift a little, but
Mm.
my drift was I listened to rock music that I was told not to for about 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was my rebellion against the rules of my parents, in a sense. I wasn't an easy kid to handle, but it was more or less just because I was ornery, not necessarily because I was doing some major flaw. I never had that. So my testimony is truly what I would say now is an ideal testimony, because
Mm.
I don't have a lot of the consequences and the scarring that was typically associated with
Yeah.
someone that really went far off
Mm.
and was at the bottom of their life, and then
Mm.
reached out for a savior to save them. Now, I'm not saying I still needed that, right?
Yeah. Of
I just
course.
didn't have to get to the lowest level
Yeah.
to realize it. And so learn from other people's mistakes and then not have to have those scars in my own life.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. I come from a similar background of growing up in a Christian home. I went to public school, which was a little different. Obviously, you hit more of the ruts in public school, and my parents always said that they put me in public school for that reason, to have me experience those ruts and those kind of things. What Before we get into the STEAM school, what got you? How did God lead you to first off Cedarville, right? And how has Cedarville impacted as you've gone on throughout your career?
So my educational journey has been my entire career, adult life. So almost 30 years now, I have been either a teacher, a professor, a dean, um, or now wearing kind of the superintendent's hat of a
Mm-hmm.
school. So education has been my career. And when I graduated from high school, I went off to what is now called Cornerstone University in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is kind of a sister college to Cedarville
Yeah.
University, similar
Yeah.
backgrounds and stuff. So I had heard of Cedarville during that time, but
Yeah.
went to Cornerstone to become a math teacher. Fell in love with science along the way. I came out dual licensed to teach 7th through 12th grade, and my journey was to go and make a difference as a Christian school teacher
Mm,
in math and science. And so that's what my wife and I did. We married um, 93. As soon as I graduated, I had a full-time position. She did as well in the Christian school.
mm,
And during that journey, I realized as I could impact more students learning in math and science, I could have more impact if I was preparing future teachers
mm,
how
yeah.
to teach, not just being the teacher. So that put me on a journey of I needed my master's and PhD, which I did
Yeah.
that in at Ohio State. And as a professor of preparing future math and science teachers, in the university, I continue to look for ways to have more impact in Christian ed. And so I was always looking for a direction to get back into Christian education.
Mm,
And I had moved up in leadership and taking on division responsibility of leadership in Atlantic City area. When the inaugural dean position came available at Cedarville University, in which I applied, and God opened the door for me to
mm,
then transition and get the position in Southwest Ohio there to be the inaugural dean of the School of Education. And so that's kind of my journey
yeah.
within education and in higher ed through multiple positions to
Mm.
eventually land at Cedarville. And I'm still in the Southwest Ohio area starting this school, just have stepped away from higher ed after 25 plus years of higher ed experience to do this.
What do you think has been the most rewarding part of higher education, especially when it comes to prepping teachers? I know for us, I know I had you as a professor. You also, when I was student teaching, fun fact, I didn't say this earlier, he also was kind of my mentor teacher for that. So yeah, that's my question is what has been the most kind of like impactful, there been a moment that you're just like, this is really what I remember.
So a lot of times I get to a point in my higher ed career in which I became fairly frustrated with the current situation I was at, and basically, doing a cry out to God kind of thing is,
Hmm.
why am I here? Why am I doing this? And what is the next step?
Yeah.
And basically, it's during those valleys of your own spiritual life that you really rely on the scripture, you really rely on godly friends, and in my case, my family was
Hmm.
huge. My wife was huge in the fact of walking that journey with me and basically seeking God's will, and then doors open. And when we transitioned from Alliance, Ohio, which is up in Northeast Ohio
Hmm.
at Mount Union University. I transitioned to a state college in New Jersey outside Atlantic City there at Stockton. And I was like, wow, that is a different culture
Yeah. Yeah.
from, mid America
Mid
to the
America.
East Shore of Jersey, and one of the most, if not the most diverse states in the Union. And that exposure to all these different people groups and to realizing the mission field has come to us,
Hmm. Yeah.
and
Hmm.
even though you're international right now doing a mission work, the reality is a lot of the international populations have come here to America,
Yeah.
and it becomes an open door. And during that time, exposure to the people groups, understanding structure and policies and procedures at a state institute really has
Hmm.
helped give me the understanding of how to present curriculum in such a way that's impactful to the student. So my tagline has always been during this journey is teach students, not content,
Hmm. Yep.
because it's not about your content, it's about students learning. And education is about human connection. It's about interacting with another person and helping them understand at a conceptual level the content. And that doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Mm.
So it's really important for that relationship to occur. And those pathways in which we were kind of uprooted from our family and put into situations in which our family had to be not only internal but reaching out to the body of
Mm.
Christ in a local church to really feel unity and community was huge in the point of now where I'm at with starting a community STEAM academy here in Southwest Ohio.
Yeah, and speaking of you starting a STEAM academy, I think this is a great time to talk about. First off, I think I grew up in small town Ohio, not too far from where you're at now, in West Liberty, Ohio. And if anybody's been to West Liberty, it's just basically cornfields and a candy store. It's pretty much what we're known for. That's that sort of thing. And growing up, I didn't have STEM. I had a computer class. We learned typing, which I still don't type right. That's probably because I just kind of didn't care in high school or whatever. But at the same time, I learned more about it in your classes, obviously. But then as I've gone, now as I'm over here and I'm in the guidance counseling role and in the computer class role, that's becoming more common of hey, we need to do this for our international students that want to go back to, let's say, China or Korea and want to get a job that is going to be multi-platform. So if you could explain explain what STEAM is, but how is that different from STEM, or is it kind of similar? You just added something to it.
So it is similar, but a uniquely different addition to it. So let me first define STEM education. And let me also say that when I explain STEM education, I'm going to tell you a story because
Yeah.
it's part of my journey.
Mm-hmm.
So as my first year, I'm dual licensed math and science. I'm teaching in high school algebra, geometry, biology, physical science, chemistry. All right. So 5 preps. And here I am only a few weeks into the teaching. And in my math classes, I give a quiz or a test and I tweak things up, right? Because if I'm assessing students' learning, I don't want it to be the exact same type of thing that they've done previously, but I want to know if they truly understand
Yeah.
mathematical concepts. And when I do that, a third, great. 2/3, horrible. They failed. And I'm like, oh man. I mean, I felt very um, like inept as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, I'm doing similar type of math instruction in my physical science class where they're doing an investigation, they're collecting data, they have to analyze the data, they have to report it in a lab, and then they have to explain why this data makes sense in this way to come up with some reality of their experiment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I give a quiz on that and I tweak it, they could do the math. And
Mm.
I'm like, wait a minute. Am I a different math teacher in my science classes than I'm a math teacher in my math classes?
Mm.
Well, I don't think so. So throughout this first few months, I was starting to try to figure out what is the unique difference. What became that it had to be based on the fact that in science class, there was reason to do the math, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just numbers solving for an X, a variable. It was, here is our issue. Let's collect information. We have this data, these
Mm-hmm.
numbers. Now let's do something with it and make sense of it,
Yeah.
interpret it, and come up with the reason. So I started putting context to when I'm teaching math. Back then, 30 years ago, that made me go to a library because no such thing as internet, at least not for me. Excuse me. And I would go and find a textbook, and it's called Applied Mathematics. It was written for colleges. So my prep time was to really revamp and take what was written as potentially doing some trigonometry or calculus, but I would revise it so that it could do some algebra or geometry.
Yeah.
And as I did that, I was implementing it into my math class, but it wasn't a word problem. Like a lot of textbooks have
Yeah.
word problems, right? It was more than that. So I started calling it advanced
Yeah.
problems because it takes multiple steps. It took a lot of time to do one. So essentially, I would give a problem at the beginning of a unit, and it could take 2 or 3 days till
Interesting.
they could come up with a solution. And what's interesting is there were multiple correct solutions.
Mm.
But there was only one way to do the math, and they had to
Yeah.
learn how to do the math, but how students approached the problems were uniquely different enough
Mhm.
so they come up with different outcomes. And the students loved it. They understood the math, and when I started doing these quizzes and tests and asked them different, they had no problems with it. And I was like, yes, this is it, right? Essentially, that was STEM instruction before there was such a thing
Before there was
called
STEM.
STEM. And so now STEM is come about where you bring in a design challenge, a solution to a real authentic situation. So let's take you have two cities that are separated by a body of water,
Mhm.
and you need to have students design a bridge to allow so much traffic, so many cars or trucks or semis to get across the bridge in a day.
Mhm.
So you have to figure out, is it going to be 2 lanes, 4 lanes, double decker, whatever. So you do a lot of brainstorming and ideation, but essentially you can come up with this great cement bridge to make that connection happen.
Yeah.
And that project has a lot of math, has a lot of science, has a lot of technology, a lot of planning and engineering. So that's the STEMs: science, technology, engineering, and math, all put together, being taught at the same time, interdisciplinary, to accomplish a goal.
Mm.
Where arts comes in is we were finding that specific people groups were disinterested in STEM really early, somewhere around middle school, all right,
Mhm.
maybe fifth, sixth grade, seventh grade. Females, a lot of high poverty populations, and typically Black and Hispanic populations. And the research seemed to suggest that they were disinterested because they didn't really care to build a bridge.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so you did it, good for you,
Whoop-de-doo.
right? And it's authentic, which a lot of people are interested in really practical reasons to learn math.
Yeah.
But there's a point to why, right? So then we started to realize from the social sciences that these populations are really interested in
Mm.
purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
Why do it? Context. The arts, the humanity piece provides that context.
Mm.
Now you are investigating the culture of city A, the culture of city B. What is going to happen to these cities when you build this connection? What happens to the economy? What happens to the languages? What happens to the way they do business?
Mm.
That is the humanity piece. That's when you bring in your foreign languages, you bring in your English language arts. That's when you bring in your understanding of the culture, the economics, the social studies pieces, the history of the cities. When you bring that in, you also bring in, let's make this beautiful. Let's make this
Mm.
aesthetically pleasing. I don't want just a cement bridge. I want something that is iconic, that is beautiful. So bring in creativity. Allow the two people groups to express themselves in the structure of this bridge. That's when you bring in the arts. That's when it becomes a STEAM project instead of a STEM project. That's when you really challenge the engineers and say,
Mm.
yes, cement is strong,
Hmm.
but we want something beautiful. Let's do something with some arches, with some wires. Let's challenge the structure of a design so it
Yeah.
looks beautiful at the same time. And that's when you connect San Francisco to Oakland and you create the Golden Gate Bridge, something that is beautiful, that becomes a destination, that the bridge itself serves a purpose, but in reality, millions of people go to San Francisco and Oakland, California for the purpose of just seeing the bridge.
Yeah.
So there's that art humanity piece that is really what STEAM education is a model of.
Now, now, I, that's actually really interesting because I think I would say that, like, I think looking at like my old high school and elementary, they're trying to introduce STEM, right? And I see how they're struggling to connect. You know, I was subbing there last spring when I was in the States, and so they're struggling to connect with certain students sometimes. You know, sometimes kids would be interested, not interested. It's very interesting to add that aspect of humanity, you know, culture, and that's really interesting. And just one question: would this basically be, because you would basically have every grade would basically be a STEAM center. So as you go from kindergarten to first grade to second grade, it would be focused 100% on this STEAM aspect, correct?
Correct. So this journey that you asked me to explain how God has given me learning experiences
Yeah.
through my career path has put me in connection with a lot of very effective teachers implementing a lot of good student-centered project-based learning type activities
Mm-hmm.
in which I instantly saw a connection for students, a motivation for students, an interest level that is well above just sitting and listening to a teacher spout out how much information they know, and it's kind of that sit and get
Yeah.
kind of mentality where the teacher kind of forces information into the student's brain. Well, this student centered approach is engaging the student in the process of learning. And in order to learn the content, they are doing some type of performance type product, right? They're making something, they're putting together maybe a play, a musical, they're singing,
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe they're doing musical instruments. Maybe they're making a three-dimensional model to put into a museum to teach about a certain historical context. Maybe they're doing video editing
Mm-hmm.
and they're utilizing something to put on YouTube as a piece for a community outreach, et cetera. There's just all sorts of these projects, these ideas of that process that I've seen. And
Yeah.
along the way, there were a lot of things that hindered effective learning
Mm.
and stopped students. And so my goal for the creation of the Community STEAM Academy here in Xenia, Ohio, was to eliminate as many of those hindrances to learning as possible. So we got rid of the bell schedule.
Mm.
So elementary, they don't have bell schedules, right? It's
Yeah.
self-contained typically. Um, one teacher teaching all the content. So interdisciplinary if the teacher chooses to do that in their curriculum. And I like that model and I wanted it to emphasize it across the entire K-12
Mm.
school.
That's awesome.
So we implement that. And it's not that one teacher teaches just a small group,
Yeah.
a team of teachers teaches
Mm.
a group of students. And
Yeah.
so it's multiple teachers with expertise in different content area planning and collaborating together
Mm.
to build a project that is then implemented into small groups of students in which as they're doing the project for the learning the unit they are learning and needing to know the content so you no longer go to a math class, but you get to a point in a project that the only way you can keep going is to understand algebra. And
Hmm.
when you're doing the algebra problem, no longer is it saying go to chapter 1, section 3, because it's the next thing. You are now saying, oh, I have two linear functions that are going to intersect. I need to know what that point is. How do I do that?
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, this group of students are asking for the teacher. Teacher, come help us.
Yeah.
We need to understand this. And it becomes a teachable moment.
Yeah.
And so teaching happens, right? They will
Yeah.
learn the math, they will learn the history, the English language arts, the foreign language, the physical education, but it's all purposely and systematically embedded in projects that as they go from one checkpoint to the next checkpoint
Hmm.
to accomplish that product, that project, they learn. And
Yeah.
they finish one project and they start another. They
Hmm.
finish one project, they start another. So what happens is there's a neighborhood of students who are working with the team of teachers to accomplish these tasks. And
Yeah.
in these neighborhoods, they don't have a structure of a bell ringing. You have to go from one place to another. The teachers decide, okay, so in this project, they really need to understand a historical concept first. So they're going
Hmm.
to spend a great deal of time at the very beginning engaged in
Hmm.
understanding of history. And then they'll understand the science pieces and stuff as they're doing the project. But that will have, so we're going to kind of modify the
Yeah.
day to make it work for the students. The other thing that was very frustrating with learning is the physical space. So facilities. So my neighborhoods are big open rooms. Now we don't have open classrooms because that's so loud and noisy it gets chaotic. But we have these large rooms. So a typical classroom is a rectangle
Yeah.
with cement brick walls, block walls with mounted cabinetry with maybe a
Yep.
sink, right?
The
Permanent.
classic.
There's one place where the teacher's desk is in the front of the room. That's typically 900 square feet.
Yeah.
I, I'm getting rid of all permanent walls, only keeping the structure that are needed, and I'm allowing teams of teachers to take thousands of square feet of learning space and design the
That's awesome.
walls
That's
to
so cool.
make it allow to function for whatever the project is. So if their project that they're doing this week needs them to have 18 smaller spaces with interactive touch panel televisions and whiteboards in a space, and there's going to be about 8 students in there, they can design that learning space
That's so
with
cool.
all these small spaces. But the next day, they have gone from the ideation. Now they're going to potential productivity. Now they need 3 rooms, and they're 1,000 square foot each. Now
Mm.
all that the facility comes in, facility team revamps that learning space, puts in
Yeah.
these walls to make it functional for the larger space. And so the team of teachers design the look and feel of the actual walls, and the
Mm.
walls are solid. It's not these, it's like the difference between a Lincoln log. I don't know if you remember playing with
Yes.
those.
Oh, yes.
you, you would build them, and then if you touch it just a little much, you go wah wah wah,
Yep.
and if you hit a little bit, bloof. These are like these walling systems are like Legos. You can build something and throw it, and it's not going to come apart,
That's
right?
awesome.
And so we're using really good pre-manufactured environmental solution walling systems that were designed for industry because they were sick of all the construction waste that would occur in a strip mall. Let's say you have
Yeah.
a different tenant come in, they rip out all these drywalls, all the steel beams, and put brand new ones up again. And the company's like, why can't we make walls that you could just rearrange? And so this is
That's so
the
cool.
technology that's out there that I'm bringing right into the classroom field. And so this STEAM school will have these kinds of elements so teachers can really make modifications and accommodate for all student learning, not just those top three, like I said, that are good at
Yeah.
memorizing the algorithms of the steps, but people that are really engaged moving.
That's first of all, it's just fascinating. I think just to think about, I could change my classroom. Trust me, I'm here in Hungary, and if you were to see the size of my classroom, yeah, you would just laugh. And one of my two things I think to maybe elaborate on just a little quickly, when you say that you got rid of the bell schedule, could you maybe, if someone's listening that's a teacher or they're a student and they're like, when he means get rid of the bell schedule, let's say not for the elementary, but let's say for the high school, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Is it mainly where they just stay with one like group of teachers, or is it where it just changes day to day?
So yes and no, but essentially think of an elementary school day in
Yeah.
high school
Okay.
and
Yeah.
middle
Yeah.
school. And now several teachers who are working across multiple groups of students plan and schedule and realize, okay, so this group will need to be working on this kind of content, this group will be working on this
Mm.
kind, and they'll decide how that happens. And so there is no dedicated algebra classroom,
Yeah.
because the dedicated space are created for the project. So many times math will be taught wherever the group of students are that are actually working on it, or
Okay.
history or whatever. Now, we do have general makerspace areas. And now the reason I say that is because we can bring in things like 3D printers,
Wow, that's cool.
label making, poster printers. We can bring in laser engravers. We can bring in belt sanders and drill
That's so cool.
presses and table saws and stuff, so that as they're producing these products, maybe even it's a theater stage for a drama presentation,
Yeah.
to bring in all of that performing arts piece, the visual arts piece and stuff. Well, they'll need access to the wood and metal and welding and how to paint and all the structure that seems like it embeds art, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it just works with it. But you also have these maker spaces that are dedicated spaces for like chemistry labs and biology labs,
Hmm.
things that are, I mean, you need to be able to have these skill
Of
sets.
course. Yeah.
So the project that will be designed for teaching a lot of the content of biology will require those groups of students at times to go into this 450 square foot smaller space biology type lab
Mhm.
to do dissections, to do your inquiry activities in the earth sciences and stuff. And they'll have the specialized equipment in there. Chemistry, you'll do chemical reactions and use fume hoods, and you have all the safety equipment and stuff that are in there. But it's smaller space because only smaller groups of students come in when it's purposely scheduled within a project. And so you're utilizing your space to the maximum. And because of this, these neighborhoods, there's no hallways,
That's
right?
awesome. Yeah.
Because you create movement by how you arrange the space. And so the space dictates how you move, and therefore you don't waste very valuable square feet in a facility by just having a hallway, long stretch with nothing there, right? Just a walkway to
Yeah.
get from. And here it's just like a neighborhood, so that the students kind of will work around and work with each other and impacting the different subject areas along the way. So that's how we can get away with not having a bell schedule, but we will have seat time, right? I mean, the
Yeah. Of
state
course. Yeah.
mandates that
Yeah.
so they'll get the learning and they'll learn the content, but when it's appropriate, not because the bell said, oh, now you're supposed to be in algebra class.
Yeah.
Oh, now you're supposed to be in a history class. And oh, now and it just, every time you do that, you stop the learning process, right? So
Yeah.
if it makes more sense to spend the morning saturated in history, let that group do that.
Hmm.
whereas the morning of these other groups are being saturated in math or saturated in doing production
Mm,
for their final product or practicing for a play to sing about invasive species
mm.
or whatever the
Yeah.
context is, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. So you mean they're still gonna have to dissect a frog? I'm guessing is that just like the common thing we do in biology? I think in every school, no matter what. But it's very interesting because as you were talking, I'm thinking back to all your classes that I had you for, and even when I was doing my student teaching, I remember you'd always would say, it's not about the amount of time you take. It's not about the amount of stuff you could flood in their brains. And I was working with first grade, and you remember that.
Yeah.
It was about creating something that allowed them to express themselves, allowed them to grow. And being over here in Hungary, for those of you that don't know, I teach at an international school which has multiple different nationalities, has students at every different you would say brain function. You have kids that are really good at math, really good at science, and that's some things that I wish we did have, because it's very hard to see the ability of some students when they're not being able to hit their full potential. Now I hear all this, and one thing that comes to my mind is that God is doing some amazing things. What would you say is something that has just been perked, it's just popped in your head and is like, God is truly working through this process, through this school, and I believe he's going to do some amazing things.
Well, first of all, the fact of the opportunity to start an independent public school in the state of Ohio. We are one of like 8 that are out there in the state of Ohio.
Wow.
So it's very rare to have the opportunity to bring together a group of board members who share in my vision and are supporting me in the as a school board to have this nonprofit independent public
Mm,
school that utilizes tax dollars to pay for tuition. So it's tuition free, right? I mean,
that's awesome.
anyone in the state of Ohio can come to this school. And the beauty is of the school is I mean I need facilities. Well, the former YMCA building
Yeah.
was
Yeah, I thought
essentially
about that. Yeah.
gifted to us to do this. The city of Xenia basically gifted us the
That's
building to
awesome.
renovate, to
So cool.
use, and then utilizing other um, funding sources like new market tax credits and opportunity zone funds and stuff to really then build a facility that is top notch to allow for this
Mm,
interaction to occur, to provide the opportunity for the teachers to be in this innovative education of the heart, mind, body, and soul. That's the tagline for the Community STEAM Academy because it's a holistic approach.
mm,
These projects are holistic. We're looking at all subjects all the time. It's because life does not happen in single um, items, right? You don't have a
mm.
problem in life that you only solve because you have math.
Yeah.
So learning is best learned when it is interdiscipline, when
Mm,
it allows for all these subjects to kind of make sense of why we're doing what we're doing. And if we link it to real world situations with the community involvement and linking it to real needs in the community, students will not ask, why are we doing this? Because they see the direct link between what they're doing and a need in the community. And so the word community in the name of the school is so important.
mm,
And, I give a lot of ideas about STEM education. I talk a lot about the neighborhoods and stuff. Truly, to get a better understanding, people just need to go to communitysteam.com.
yeah.
And that
Of course.
website really shows a lot of the mission and vision of the school. It talks about these neighborhood spaces. It explains how it's a unique project-based, student-centered approach. there's tons of, we just opened a blog page, so we have
That's
some blog
awesome.
posts that talk about the different components. And
Mm,
in the first blog, there is what is STEAM learning. So the uniqueness of that integration of the arts, the humanity piece into
yeah.
the STEM projects and stuff. And so the website really is a great source for an individual to go look at and see a lot more about it. And we have our social media sites as well that are out there that you can learn more about that.
And I think what's really cool, and as I obviously my mom being and family being back in the States, I hear a little bits about this, or I hear from Cedarville people or whatever, and I hear about the school, and I just see how like God truly is using Xenia, Ohio, right? Like I went to Cedarville 4 years. I mean, how many times did I drive through Xenia, right? And I did some teaching stuff in Xenia, and knowing what that community is like, and I think that's where we can really see God working, in the sense that He's letting you have a place inside of the city of Xenia to reach all of these kids, these students that they don't realize that the thought process behind necessarily this whole school, and how God is truly working. And I think, as someone that went through public school, those Christian teachers I didn't realize were Christian until I kind of got out of school, and realized, like, wow, they were pouring into me, and had no idea. um I think that's what's really cool about this STEAM, in the sense, like, it is a community. And
Yeah.
I think of Cedarville, right? Like, Cedarville was a community, and that's what we based on when we did education. We based on community, and how do you create that community. And I think it's just really cool to see what you guys are doing in, I would say, a place that is crazy to think that it's like 20 minutes from Cedarville, right? And you have
Right.
all these young teachers that are like, hey, I want to get experience, and half of them probably never even heard of STEM before they got to Cedarville, and so
Right.
that's a great opportunity for them in that sense. And what would you say is the most, like, the one thing you're looking forward to the most out of this whole process, out of what's in the future? What's the one thing you're going, this is what I'm looking forward to most?
So you are correct about the whole sense of community and that whole idea of what it's like to build a culture, a family of
Yeah.
learners, right? And because of that, you embed as a teacher so much of your time and energy
Mm,
into individual students.
mm,
And as a teacher, I was driven to teaching because of that aha moment
mm.
that students got when I'm helping explain it, and like, oh, now I get it. That makes sense, right? And in the satisfaction that I get by helping others do that. So that others focus
Mm,
community culture, I am so looking forward to seeing that in action, and seeing students who are so on fire to learn
mm.
that you actually have to say, okay, stop. You really need to go to lunch. Take time now, go to lunch. It'll be here when you come
Mm,
back, right?
yeah.
And they're just so engaged and so excited about learning that they can't wait to
Mm,
keep going. And truly, that is not rose colored glasses looking
yeah.
at reality. It truly happens. I've seen it in classrooms across the United States when
Mm,
teachers implement these kinds of student centered relational building
mm,
experiences. And all of a sudden, the student realizes this teacher, or in my case, teams of teachers,
yeah.
are dedicated to see me be successful. And
Mm,
because of that, I'm going to try to be successful. Think of, like, you watch a YouTube video of this
mm,
10-year-old who is at a karate class, right? And the sensei is challenging them to break these four pieces of wood, and this little
mm,
10-year-old's coming and chop it and trying to break it, and hits it, and it hurts, and he can't do it, and the sensei's telling, okay, this is how you do it, and it, over and over, they're failing multiple times. Then the group of students get around him and kind of start cheering him on, and it's
mm.
that 11th or 12th time he hits it and it breaks. What happens, right? eruption. They pick the kid up on the shoulders and prance
Yeah.
around. He is like, nothing is going to stop me now, right? I
Mm,
got this. Bring on the world. That sense of confident identity,
mm,
because through those series of failures with a support system there to help them become successful, now it makes more purpose, more
mm,
meaningful. And now bring on these problems, bring on the challenges of
mm,
global hunger. I can take it on because I just built the confidence in my classroom to handle this community need about a food desert or food insecure population group
mm,
in Southwest Ohio. And
mm.
that's the kind of impact that we as educators can have in the classroom.
So
But
true.
I purposely was training at Cedarville University teachers how to do, like yourself,
Hmm.
that now I get to do it. So
Yeah.
now I get to step into the seats and actually put this into practice, and not just teach how to do it, but now I get the privilege of actually doing it.
Yeah. And it's so cool to see how God is using you and in this process. And um, before we finish up here, I just want to talk about the school real quickly. Um, so when will this school, what is the aim date for the school to be opened up? And what does it look like for a student to apply, or how does that whole process work?
Great. So thanks for asking, because this is really the crux of everything is the
Yeah.
Ohio Department of Education given us the independent STEAM designated approval to open in fall 22. So this August
Awesome. Wow.
we will open, all right? Due to COVID and a lot of restrictions, our facilities will not be full capacity right away.
Hmm.
So we'll be opening 6th through 10th grade, and we'll expand out the school and open a second location for our elementary building. Right now, planning in fall of 24. But by fall 25, we should be a complete K-12 school, approximately 1,200 students,
That's awesome.
open to anyone who thinks this is a good fit for
Mm.
their child or grandchild. Um, and so the easiest way to start the enrollment process is to come to the communitysteam.com website.
Hmm.
There's a place that says I'm interested. You can click on it. At the top, there's a banner that says click here if you're interested. You can click on it, and it will bring up a form. You fill it out and submit it, and that will start the entire process to give you more information about admissions and enrollment process for the starting of the fall 2022 school year.
Now, does the student, because I obviously I cover public school, so the whole like, where you can be live. Now, let's say someone from West Liberty, I'm just gonna use my hometown, and they wanted to go to the STEAM Academy, right? This community centered school. They're like, mom and dad are like, that's where you're gonna go. Sorry, West Liberty, we love you, but no, right? Do they have to be in the district of, let's say, Xenia school district, or can they be from anywhere within a certain radius?
So anywhere in the state of Ohio
Okay.
is eligible to come.
Hmm.
Now, within a 30-mile radius of the actual building of the school,
Yeah.
tax dollars will provide funding to bus or provide transportation to the school.
That's cool. That's
So
awesome.
we function as a public school as similar to like open enrollment.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for instance, there's somebody that goes in West Liberty School District, but yet they really, really want to go to Dayton City
Hmm.
Schools, and Dayton City School is an open enrollment school. So they would apply. If they were accepted, then they could actually go to Dayton City Schools. Even though they lived in West Liberty, they
Okay.
could
Yeah.
go to Dayton City because it's an open enrollment school.
I see.
Now, school districts choose if they're open enrollment or not. So there are some that aren't. For instance, in Greene County, Beaver Creek School District is a closed school district. The only way you can go to Beaver Creek
If you live
schools
in the
is if
area.
you live in the geographical
Mm.
region of that school district. But here in the Community STEAM Academy, Xenia, Xenia is just the location of the school.
Okay.
We have no geographical school district except for the entire state of Ohio. So anyone can come. And And like other independent schools, like Global Impact STEM Academy, which is in Springfield, Ohio, there are people that lived in Washington Courthouse
Okay.
that went there. That's like a 40-mile drive every day,
That's a
but
hike.
they wanted to go there, so they drove 1 hour just to go
That's
to
crazy.
school there and came back. And so it is plausible that anyone in the state of Ohio is eligible to come.
It's actually kind of funny because this is actually kind of how my school works as an international school. We have a kid, I have a senior, right? Like I'm a guidance counselor, I work with the seniors. He travels like an hour and 15 minutes every day by bus, but like public bus. So we all know how public buses are. And so that's a very similar situation where these kids, they want to come to a international English speaking school to learn. So it's similar in that cases. Now we talked about the students, we talked about how to apply. What about staff needs? Is there any, are you hiring at this moment, or have you filled your needs? What if a teacher or, someone that's like, hey, I want to move into this type of schooling, is there a possibility for that at STEAM?
So as transparent as possible is we are unsure about our complete staffing needs right now.
Okay.
Because a lot has to do with how many applications we get, what levels we get. I have a lot of verbal commitments of teachers who are planning on, and principals and leadership who are planning on being part of the school. But until we get a little bit closer to that, we are really unsure. So
Okay.
what I do is anyone that's interested in a staffing position, whether that is looking at janitorial services or
Yeah.
cafeteria, office help, or a teacher that's licensed to teach, um, what I have them do is there's a contact page on our website. So if they
Yeah.
go to communitysteam.com, go to the contact page, fill it out, then I can contact them and we can start the conversation. I can tell them more about the school. I can show them the plans about the school, and then see if it's a good fit for them. And then what would happen is I'll keep their name and information. And once we get to a position, yes, we need this, then I would invite them to fill out an application and go through the formal process of building a contract and then accepting them into the position. But right now, we're in this time and period that we have to wait and then instigate those processes once it gets a little bit closer.
That's awesome. I think it's a really cool situation that's going on here. But for those that want to follow you, I know if there's anybody that's on social media, right? If there's anybody, like I took a class with Dr. Ervin, and I think the Twitter I made is still the same Twitter, and I never use it really. I like
Oh,
rarely.
come on.
That's the thing. I feel bad because like every time I'm like, man, I see like you post something, I'm like, dang it, I need to keep up on that.
There's a lot of good resources there.
There is. My wife laughs like she knows that I have a Pinterest board, but if you look at my Pinterest board, it's literally all from school. And so it's all the things that you made us, pin on our board. And so I thought it was just really funny that it still exists and it's still out there. She posts stuff to it. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But if people are interested in following you on your social media, what are some of your social media that they can get in touch with you? Maybe ask, maybe they have a question about STEAM or just about education. How can they do that?
Sure. So, like you said, I do have my Twitter handle is DRJ Ervin. So at DRJERV as in Victor IN. My all of the community STEAM accounts are CSA Xenia. So XENIA. So that is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then the other one I forget off the top of my head.
TikTok?
Go to the website. Yeah. No, I don't think we've opened TikTok yet, just because I can't. I'm trying to keep up with everything, so I haven't gotten that far yet. YouTube, it is the other one.
YouTube,
a YouTube channel, and so. Go to communitysteam.com. You can link there too.
Okay.
And I post a lot of stuff so they can then follow me, whether through LinkedIn or Facebook. That's probably the most direct way, is just go through the website. Everything's connected at some point in time there.
Awesome. And for all of you that are listening, first off, thank you for listening. Pray for Dr. Ervin and his team as they're going through this. Like, let's be honest, in the middle of COVID, trust me, I'm teaching in COVID. It's not easy. It's not easy to be creating a school in the middle of COVID either. So be praying for him. Again, if you've loved this episode of the podcast, just favorite it, share it. I want people to hear about this school because it's something that's different. It's something that is going to make a difference in the community in Ohio, really in general in Ohio, which I think would be really, really cool. And if you enjoy this, let me know. Let me know down in the comments if you have any interest in this or conversation about this. And again, Dr. Ervin, thank you so much for coming on here and just sharing about your story and what God is doing with the STEAM Academy in Xenia, Ohio. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Ben. Again, I appreciate it. Proud of you. You've come a long way in your educational process, and super, super proud of you, bud.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see you. I really hope you enjoyed the interview that I had with Dr. Ervin and hearing his story. And that's honestly where I want to take this podcast. And yeah, there'll still be an occasional episode where it's just me talking about maybe something going on in life. But in general, and really, I think my whole dream of this, and I never really got to do it while I was in Hungary, because I just was naive and didn't think about it, is I want to share people's stories. And that's one of my ultimate dreams and why I love doing this, to share people's stories and to hear people share with me some great advice. And so hopefully for the next, few episodes, and as I gain steam, more and more people will be joining on to talk about what God is doing in their lives. And so I hope that you are encouraged by this. I hope that you are I hope you stick out with me. And I know I haven't been consistent with this podcast, and I get it. If you don't want to listen anymore, totally understand. But I hope that you will stick with me as I start this new journey, and we will learn together and glorify God together in many ways. And so I hope that you enjoyed. And if you did, drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.